Hello everyone, and thanks very much for all the support with my videos, the likes, shares and comments, and thanks to everybody who supports me through buying me a coffee. I'm very grateful. And I'm here in Rathmines, and this is Church of the Holy Trinity that was designed by John Semple, famous Irish architect that was responsible for many churches around Dublin. This church was built in 1828, nearly 200 years old, very much in the Gothic style, and is known locally as the Black Church because of the local limestone that was used from a quarry quite close by to construct this church. And when it rains, it gets very dark. It's actually interesting because it's on an island on its own in the middle of the road. So today I want to speak about Leo Varadkar, who's been over in Bucharest, bowing down to Ursula von der Leyen, the unelected leader of the European Union, who's been 5 years in place as the head of the European Commission, and now she's looking for another 5 years in the European Commission. And over the last number of days there's been meetings of the European People's Party and the European People's Congress, and today it's been announced that Ursula von der Leyen has been given the go-ahead by the European People's Party to be their candidate for the head of the European Commission. So we've seen the powers being devolved, more centralised power grab going to the European Commission. I've spoken about it in quite a number of videos about the way legislation is proposed through the power of the lobby groups in Europe, big corporate interests, who then push the policies onto the European Commission, and all the policies that originate in Europe end up in Ireland. Well, the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of policies that are brought to Ireland originate from the lobbyists, and Ursula von der Leyen is the head of the European Commission, unelected head as well. So in the last number of days there has been a meeting in Bucharest, and it's been quite interesting because Leo Varadkar, Irish Taoiseach, has been there, and he's been eulogising about the great job that Ursula von der Leyen has been doing. He also said that Europe needs to stand on its own 2 feet, whatever that means. And he also said that they should keep supporting the re-election and reappointment of Ursula von der Leyen. Now this is quite interesting because the vote itself was held by secret ballot. There was well over 800 delegates were in attendance in Bucharest, but only 489 people voted. I wonder what happened to the other 300 plus delegates that turned up to Bucharest from the European People's Congress. And 89 of those said no to Ursula von der Leyen. Now, I don't know, a number of months ago there was a poll within the European Commission where a lot of the offices in Brussels, where a lot of the staff that work there were deeply unhappy, to put it mildly, with von der Leyen. Unsurprisingly, like the vast majority of people in Europe, I'm always certain, will be deeply unhappy with Warmonger in chief, Ursula von der Leyen. But again, the vote went through, it's carried, and now she's going to be pushing on this deeper technocratic drift that the European Union is headed on. We've seen that during the period of COVID, and we've seen it now. Most recently, I spoke about in a video last week about the Eurobonds, where the European Commission are now being given control, or looking for control through the Ukraine project, to get Eurobonds. So they would be responsible for sovereign debt instead of countries having control over your sovereign debt and going into the markets to fund projects, infrastructural projects and policy so far in their state. This is now going to be given to the European Commission, who are looking for a huge power grab. They did this during COVID with the COVID bonds that went in during that period, the Sure bonds that they were called as well, and now they're trying to do the same thing now with these Euro bonds, stroke war bonds, and that would add an extra taxation onto people that I spoke about in a video last week. You can look back on it as well, which again is a huge drift towards totalitarianism in the European Union. And it's interesting as well because this will be decided upon from the 27 leaders of the European Union member states, and her whole approach is to say that she will stand for European democracy. Unsurprisingly, Ursula von der Leyen, and we need to stand on for prosperity in the European Union. where most countries are heading into huge recessions. Some countries haven't left recessions, despite what the GDP figures would tell you about how well the wealthy are doing. Well, there's huge inequalities and poverty happening here in Ireland and right across the European Union too. Fuel poverty and many people struggling from the extortionate cost of living crisis, which was helped by the magic money tree printed through the European Central Bank. And people like founder Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Central Bank, said inflation came out of nowhere, and it came from their policies of magic money tree, the quantitative easing policies. It came from their policies during COVID, a huge transfer of wealth towards the billionaires, and they came from the supply lines being cut down during that period as well. So and there we have it, and the huge profiteering that goes on with these big companies that they move heaven and earth to support every time. So it's interesting that von der Leyen now is looking for this big move for the next number of years as we head on a deeper dive towards Orwellian dystopia. And it's interesting because Varadkar, who was there, typically one of the best boys in the class, turning up, and Varadkar again has spoken about the war in Ukraine and has spoken about that it's our war too here in Ireland. Ireland is a neutral country. Ireland, in its constitution, seeks pacific settlements to international disputes. And we've seen a huge erosion of our neutrality over the last 20 years, as I've spoken about in many videos, through the use of Shannon. We've seen by US warplanes, we've seen the incursion of NATO warships, we've seen loads of NATO exercises happening in Irish barracks. The Irish Defence Forces have been members of NATO's Partnership for Peace, involved in demining with the Ukrainians, weapons training for Ukrainians again, which is another breach of our neutrality. And last week we had Rob Bauer, the head of NATO in Europe, that came along to Ireland. And in response to this, Leo Varadkar again is pushing this, our war too. Again, more money is going to be lamped across to Ukraine, the 60 billion that we're going to pay more for the same amount of awful public services. And he's pushing towards the PESCO deal as well, as I said, and more battle groups. And as well, the move and the chaos that immigration has caused, in particular from Ukraine, with over 2% of our population increasing in the last number of years because of the flow of so many people that have come from Ukraine. And not to mention the sanctions. We've had 13 rounds of sanctions at this point. Maybe 13 times unlucky for ordinary people. But again, who's benefiting from these sanctions packages? It's not the ordinary working class people who pay through the nose for energy costs, businesses, small businesses going out of business up and down the country, here in Rathmines and many more places. And we've seen the fallout of these policies that Leo Varadkar is off in Bucharest. And it's interesting because the commissioner that's responsible, that's appointed by the President of the European Commission, von der Leyen, is Mairead McGuinness. And she's responsible for the financial issues in the European Union. And one of her remit is the sanctions. And it's actually an Irish man called David O'Sullivan who's in charge of the sanctions. And he's an ex-European Union ambassador to the United States. Isn't that interesting? So when Varadkar said we have to stand on our own 2 feet, it's interesting. They'd be left holding a bathwater while this war continues, rather than looking for a lasting and a negotiated peace and a proper settlement. But unfortunately, we've seen this push towards war. Varadkar spoke about that Ireland's on the edge of the Western world. We're on the edge of the Western world and we're under deep threat of attack by Russia. This is the fear that's being pushed about the undersea cables and all this nonsense that they're trying to push through the mainstream narrative as well. And he said that we've opened our hearts to all the Ukrainians that have come here in Ireland. Well, I think the people beg to differ with the chaos that's been created by the immigration disaster in Ireland, such as the ordinary working class people who are paying for it most of all, as I've spoken about in many, many videos. So it's interesting, but he said he'll stand with Ukraine as long as it takes, and the same old nonsense we've come to expect from Varadkar. So when he's off playing the big guy in Europe, people are struggling back here in Dublin, across Ireland, because of his policies and his government's policies. Just on a side note, he said tomorrow there's a referendum in Ireland on that I've spoken about previously that I'll be voting no to vote on. And he spoke about to say it would be a setback if people didn't vote. Yes, this is remarkable coming from a person who has destroyed the housing, health system, people with disabilities, workers and so forth in Irish society. Typical hypocrites, deceitful con men and lawyers. That's what they are, who serve the super rich and wealthy and big corporations. But the interesting facet of this is the drive towards militarism, because van der Leyen now is looking to get battle ready and to buy European, build up the military industrial complex. So this is the big agenda. Let's build up the military industrial complex. Let's build up the war machines in Europe. Let's build up the threat of an invasion by Putin. You couldn't make this stuff up, but this is how they're scripting it, how they're going to keep scripting it. And it's also interesting because this is how the context to Ireland is important, because the head of the Irish Defence Forces is a man called Sean Clancy. Now he's been proposed now as being the new head of the European Union Military Committee, to chair that military committee. Head of a neutral country. This is part of the plan to drag us towards NATO and to drag us towards a European military union, stroke defence union, whatever they want to call it. So we have this, as I've said, this push, and we're working with more battle groups, and now they're going to move an Irish man to possibly chair next year the highest military body in the European Union. And also Micheál Martin, the Minister for Defence, Foreign Affairs, Taoiseach, leader of Fianna Fáil, has also increased the age, not the wage, the age of members entering the Irish Army from 29 currently up to 39. And he's also increased the retirement age from 60 up to 62. So you can see where this is heading. It's pretty clear to see. Create the enemy, create the boogeyman. Now we're going to build up the military industrial complex. Now we're going to build up the weapons of war, the arms industry. The 1% are going to profit, and they're going to hammer ordinary working class people. They're hammering them with basic rights, and it's ironic when they talk about democracy, when look what they're doing here in Ireland. Trying to criminalise speech, freedom of expression, through a hate speech bill that they cannot define. They cannot define what hate is, but yet we want to legislate for it and criminalise for it. Same people who want to legislate for durable relationships, which they can't define either. So really the lunatics have taken over the asylum, and you really have to call these people out for what they are, because it's absolutely crazy, unhinged stuff they're trying to sell to the people. And the sooner more and more people are aware and made aware of what's going on, the better. So please share my videos, please support my work, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, press like to my Facebook page, and thanks to follow me on all the channels as well. But use your voice also to speak up. It's vitally and critically important that all of us do speak up about the absolute nonsense that's being pushed at people day after day, that's driving more and more people into poverty and huge issues. So from Dublin, take care, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye bye. See you later. Bye bye.